Next, I'm going to jump over to vestibular success criteria. And this one, animation from interactions. This is a 3A, so this is technically an above and beyond our stated goal of reaching WCAG 2.1 A and AA compliance. And in discussion with our Octode stakeholder, we felt this was worth including here. And really what we're looking for is ways to honor users' preference for reduced motion. If someone doesn't want like smooth scrolling, or if they don't want animations on the screen, like a pulse effect or things like that, they have the ability to turn on a prefers reduced motion setting in their operating system. So in Mac OS, in iOS, in Windows 10, in the settings preferences, users can prefer reduced motion. And that should then, we should then be smart and capture that in our CSS and turn off motion and honor what users are asking for. And specifically, success here means animation behaviors should be turned off when users scroll, or when users like scroll back to the top of the page or reload the next page of the form. The movement from the bottom of the page to the top of the page should be instant. We shouldn't see that nice smooth scrolling. It should just be weird jump to the top of the page. I've been looking a little bit into our scroll to top helper function. I believe there is a way that we can add a check to that helper function that doesn't require any action from product teams, that will just be available and will be listening for the user's preference. I'm going to dig into that a little bit more in the days ahead. So hopefully with this one, product teams won't be asked to do a lot of additional work unless you are doing like custom interactions or custom like micro interactions going forward. Now the next one up will be color contrast, and this one really gets pushed down to pushed left in our software development lifecycle into early design phase, and it stems around adjacent colors, not necessarily just text to background. Text to background has always had a color contrast requirement of 4.5 to 1. Now, WCAG 2.1 takes that a step further and asks for a 3 to 1 contrast ratio between adjacent colors. So with this first graphic up here, I have a light blue next to our medium blue or our link blue from our design system. And if these two colors were next to each other in an interface, like two background colors or a button next to a background, that only has a contrast ratio of 2.57 to 1. So that would be a violation. That one we'd have to call out. We might say, okay, if you're going to use this light blue background, could you use our dark blue background next to it and bump that contrast ratio up to 5.99 to 1. This also does apply to things like our focus halos. Noah and I just talked about focus halo earlier today. He has that as an item he's going to be working on very near term to bump up the contrast in our focus halo, and so it behaves, or so it has a 3 to 1 ratio on light backgrounds and dark backgrounds. For designers or for folks who are working with color, or anyone who's got a few moments to do this type of spot checks, we've included links to the Who Can Use website and also links to the Cluse plugin for Sketch and also the Stark plugin for Sketch. These will let you do color contrast pairing checks right from within your design tools. And you can tell at a glance, are we going to run into trouble with this pairing, yes or no? All right, text spacing is the next one up. And text spacing, this one, we get a lot of this for free just by the way the web defines typography and the way we're using it in our design system. It's more of a, we want product teams to do some foundational checking and verify that we haven't taken power away from the users to change how text is spaced. Specifically, pick 2 or 3 views. If you have like 2 or 3 template types, or if your application has a form and has like a confirmation page, those would be good views. And we ask that teams use developer tools in Chrome or Firefox or Safari or Edge, And just go in and adjust these CSS declarations specifically for line height, vertical margin, letter spacing, and word spacing. And what you're looking for is, like in a paragraph block, your line height must be at least 1.5 times the regular font size. So if your line height is 1.5, you're already there. You've already met that criteria. Margin after paragraphs should be at least 2 times font size. Letter spacing can be at least 0.12 times font size. Word spacing can be at least 0.16 times font size. The last thing we're really, and probably the most important one here, is we want to make sure we're not using any important rules on inline style tags. All these things, all these checks are doing is making sure if users want to create their own specific style sheet that lives on their browser for our content, that we're not going to get in the way, that we're going to let users make the content taller, space letters out more or less, add margin between paragraphs. And so doing these cursory checks, just adjusting line height, adjusting margin, adjusting letter spacing, as long as things are still readable, that's what we're looking for. If for instance, you go in and you try to change line height and make line height 2, for instance, and the layout didn't change, that's the kind of thing that would be a problem here and would warrant a further look or further investigation. The next one up is keyboard success criteria. So I talked a bit about character key shortcuts yesterday. Some websites like Gmail allow you to use, I think, Vim style shortcut keys, pressing the J or K key to move through email messages. If you press the period button in GitHub on a repo, it will open up a VS Code editor. Those are really cool things. To meet our success criteria here, we need to make sure that a few things are true. Those type of keyboard shortcuts should only be active when an element has focus. So in our case, we get this for free with our buttons and links. We can press the return key to launch a link. We can press return or spacebar to activate a button, but only when those buttons have focus. We can use our skip link when it has focus. Otherwise, it's inert or it has no effect. That's what we want. If we are using custom shortcuts like the J or K key or the period key, those shortcuts must be able to be turned off. The user can say, I don't want shortcut keys, or users should be able to remap those shortcut keys to include a second key like Control, Command, or Alt. This is really important for assistive tech, for screen readers in particular, because a lot of the keyboard is mapped to very specific functions inside the screen reader. And if we try to override that, we could cause a confusing or difficult situation for users.